The New York Giants defensive line got a lot of love this offseason, and with good reason. I'll break it all down for you coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work as well as that of my writing team. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, Giant fans, on today's Locked On Giants podcast, we are continuing our look at the various position groups as we inch so close to the start of training camp. It's going to be here before we know it. Another couple weeks, 2.5 weeks, I think it's going to be. And today we are going to start on the defensive side of the ball. We finished up the offensive side, so now we're going to go to the defensive side and we're going to take a look at the defensive line. Now we'll talk about the needs and the changes and the goals in the first segment. Then we'll take a look at some of the returning players and what we might expect, as well as maybe a few of the newcomers and what we could expect there. And then, of course, what to watch this summer. The defensive line going to be one of the interesting position groups to keep an eye on, given what the Giants did in the offseason to add a little love to that unit. So let's get into it. Now, the defensive line, when I say Giants defensive line, what comes to mind, right? Dexter Lawrence, all right? Dexter Lawrence has basically been the face of the New York Giants defensive line. But you would think that, with Dexter Lawrence, who is basically an all-world type of player, probably the best defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman in the game today, you would think that the run defense would be a lot better. Well, it hasn't. And that's not Dexter's fault. Where the Giants' run defense really started to go down the tubes is when they traded away Leonard Williams, who was Dexter Lawrence's partner in crime, if you will. The Giants' run defense just absolutely slid down the tubes. They never really replaced Leonard Williams, because back in those times, Dexter Lawrence wasn't drawing the double teams that he seems to draw, or has drawn, I should say, of late. He had Leonard Williams next to him to take off some of the pressure that he was regularly facing. So you look at the Giants' run defense and where it has ranked since 2022. It was 27th. Then it went to 29th. In 2023, and last year 27th again. Now that again, folks, is not on Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence against the run, really good, despite the fact that he gets double and triple teamed. The problem with the Giants defensive line has basically been the depth around Dexter Lawrence. Every time Dexter has come off the field, whether it be for a breather or last year as the case were, because of his season-ending elbow injury, opponents go right to that spot because they know that there was a drop-off between Dexter Lawrence and the next man up. And that was a big, big problem for the Giants. Now, ironically, when Dexter Lawrence was injured and had to miss the rest of the season, the Giants' run defense got a little bit better. But they made a change in order to make that happen. All right. So before Dexter Lawrence was injured, the Giants basically went with 2 down linemen. When Dexter was injured, they went to a traditional 3 down lineman to stop the bleeding. And they had some success with it. Not a whole lot, but it looked like the run defense got a little bit better. So it was kind of deceiving a little bit because people will look at the numbers and they'll say, oh, the Giants' run defense got a little bit better when Dexter Lawrence left the lineup. No, 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 no. They had to make an adjustment to the scheme in order to fix the bleeding, like I said. So that being said, depth on the defensive line was a huge problem for the Giants. Now, last year, it was kind of interesting. In the summertime, the Giants came into camp. They had some veterans, but mostly young guys. And I forget exactly when it happened, but at some point during training camp, they decided to trade away Jordan Phillips to the Dallas Cowboys. Jordan Phillips being a veteran. That left the Giants with primarily youth. They had Jordan Riley, they had DJ Davidson, Elijah Chapman, who had made the roster as an undrafted free agent. Not a whole lot of experience there. Now, they did have Raheem Nunez Roches, who they had signed as a free agent, but Nacho, who came in with a reputation as being a run stopper. Not horrible, but not a whole lot of plays that you can point to and say, yeah, that was an impact type of play, like you would maybe expect from a Dexter Lawrence. So the Giants, in having to go with the youth movement, because they kind of moved away from the veterans, except with the exception again for really Nacho. And then for a little while there, they had Armon Watts, but he ended up getting injured and really wasn't much of a factor. They had young guys there, and it kind of showed. So basically, everything fell on Dexter Lawrence's shoulders, and Dexter did what he could, and he was pretty darn good, all things considered. But as I've been saying all the time when I talk about this topic, he couldn't do it alone. And that was evident that by the time the season ended, the Giants needed to address the defensive line depth. And that's exactly what they did in the offseason. So the Giants, when you talk about the defensive line, again, what's their identity? Dexter Lawrence and what else? Or who else? It's not like, they have a fearsome front or anything like that. It's Dexter and who else? And that's one of the things the Giants defensive front needs to work on. Now, I just want to add one other thing about the run defense. The struggles weren't always on, or only on, I should say, the defensive front. The linebackers obviously had something to do with that as well, and that they weren't coming up, they weren't filling holes. It was just a mess. But it starts up front. And the Giants defensive line against the run, not very good. Against the pass, pass rush, other than really for Dexter Lawrence and maybe here and there, Raheem Nunez Roches got a pass rush off, or DJ Davidson managed to disrupt a little bit. But primarily it was Dexter and no one else. And you just can't have one guy being your entire unit. You have to have multiple guys. So that was the biggest problem for the New York Giants defensive front, really the depth. And as I mentioned, they went to more veterans this year. They added Roy Robertson Harris, Jeremiah Ledbetter. They did draft Darius Alexander in the third round, a guy who they are very high on, a guy who they believe can be an every down player, maybe replace finally Leonard Williams alongside of Dexter Lawrence. That's still to be determined, of course. But the Giants brought in a lot more depth on that defensive line because the youth movement really didn't get it done last year. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about the youth movement as well as the returning veterans. That's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. New to FanDuel? Hey, it's a perfect time to sign up. New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if their first bet wins. So go on, download the FanDuel app open it up, or visit fanduel.com to get started. And don't forget to use our promo code locked on, or just go to fanduel.com/locked on to get started. That's fanduel.com/locked on. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and this is going to be the last show for the week. I'm going to take a nice long weekend with the July 4th holiday coming up, but I will be back next week on Monday. We'll continue looking at the various position groups. We still have to do outside linebackers, inside linebackers, safeties, cornerbacks, and I may do special teams. I haven't decided if I'm going to do specials. But specials is kind of easy, other than maybe the return specials and stuff like that. But I'll make up my mind on that next week, obviously. So anyway, let's get back to the current topic. The current topic is the Giants defensive line. And we're going to take a quick look at the returning guys and maybe some of these new guys and what kind of role they might play on this defensive line. Now, before I get into it, I want to point out what the Eagles did in the Super Bowl. Now, the Eagles in the Super Bowl, as you all know, those of you who saw it, they were so deep on that defensive line that they were able to rotate guys in and out, keep guys fresh, keep, their foot on the jugular of the Kansas City Chiefs. It was just a really strong performance by the defensive front, and it emphasized the importance of having depth on the defensive line, quality depth that you could turn to, because you don't want to, force a Dexter Lawrence to have to play every single down, every single snap. That's just counterproductive, believe it or not, to his longevity. So let's kick things off. All right, let's start with Dexter. What can you say about Dexter? Just all world, 9 sacks through 7 games, which at one point led the league. And he had to really work for his sacks because the man was doubled and sometimes tripled on just about every pass rush that he was on. He was just, there was no stopping him. He's a big-bodied man, athletic, can move well, and opponents just had no answer for him. So basically, it took the injury bug to remove him from the game. And when he was out, like I said before, opponents went right after that spot that he vacated, often with success. That's how valuable Dexter Lawrence is to this Giants defense. So that's why it was of utmost importance for the Giants to add some talent so that Dexter doesn't have to do it alone, which he had to basically do a lot of last year and the year before that. All right, let's talk about Nacho, Raheem Nunez-Roches. Nacho came in as a reputation as being primarily a run stuffer, not really much of a pass rusher. What's interesting about Nacho is he's got mobility, all right? He made a lot of his plays against the run in pursuit, but when it came time to shedding blocks and doing things at the point of the attack, that's where Nacho kind of, struggled a little bit. Nacho ended up starting alongside of Dexter last year. Nacho's not a bad player, but I don't think he's a starter moving forward. I really don't. I think, again, the goal is to have Darius Alexander be the starter next to Dexter. I think that's what the Giants want to do. But Nacho, let's take a look at some of his stats. 19 stops, which were 7 more that he had the year before. He had 52 tackles, which was a career high for him. He equaled his career high in sacks with 2. He had 2 tackles for a loss. Just not really a starter moving forward. When you're a one-trick pony, it just kind of telegraphs what you're going to do. So that's why the Giants put an emphasis on bringing in guys who can not only stop the run, but also potentially rush the passer. And Nacho's just not that guy. Now, that said, he's a good leader. He's well-liked in the locker room. The coaches like him. He's got a good, attitude, a good personality. That's why he's probably still on this team. That's why he will probably make this team, despite the fact that he's got no more guaranteed money and he's got a pretty high cap hit. Quite honestly, I thought he was going to be a cap casualty earlier in the year, but he's still here. So Nacho is somebody to keep an eye on. What kind of role does he carve out for himself moving forward? I don't think, again, it's going to be as a starter. Okay. Darius Alexander, the rookie. Alexander, as I mentioned, he is the guy that I think the Giants want to eventually be the new running mate alongside of Dexter Lawrence. The problem with Darius Alexander, for whatever the reason, didn't work during the spring. All right. He was dealing with some sort of injury. I don't know what it was. All I could tell you is that there were times when I saw him out on the field, standing on the field, watching things. So if he was that bad off, I don't think he would have been standing on his feet for 2 hours on that hard turf in the field house, which can take its toll on your lower back. I know. So whatever he had, hopefully it's minor. Hopefully he is ready to go, because look, the concern when a rookie misses time, especially in the spring, is that they fall behind. So I don't know how far behind Darius Alexander is. Again, I don't know what he's dealing with. I don't know if he's going to be ready to start training camp. Brian Dable, kind of downplayed all the injuries in the springtime. So we'll see if Darius Alexander is ready to go. But that's a guy who's got the college pedigree, who I think is going to be a good player once he gets up to snuff at the NFL level. Jordan Riley is a guy that I got to be honest with you. He fell behind DJ Davidson on the depth chart, and I'm really not sure exactly why. I mean, I thought Jordan Riley, when he got his opportunities, he showed flashes. Now, maybe, the reason why he fell behind DJ Davidson, again, one trick pony. He didn't really show much on the pass rush, whereas DJ Davidson did. DJ Davidson had a really good bull rush that he put to his advantage. But where DJ Davidson struggled, to be honest with you, was in shedding blocks. So, as has been the case with most of the defensive linemen, they were either run stoppers or, well, most of them are run stoppers with very little to offer on the pass rush. And you kind of you're going to need a little bit more from those guys. Now, DJ Davidson, just talking about him, or staying on him rather, he wasn't afraid to throw his body around in pursuit and upfield on passing downs, but he really struggled at the point of the attack, struggled to get off his blocks. And that was kind of surprising. Whereas Jordan Riley didn't have that problem. So, it's interesting. If you could take Jordan Riley and DJ Davidson's skill sets and bring them together, you would probably have a complete defensive lineman. But the Giants, as I said, they decided to go and add veteran depth as well as Darius Alexander, because the performance last year just wasn't good enough. It just wasn't. And the Giants, that defensive line is where it all starts up front. If you're not winning in the trenches, then you're not going to have a chance of winning the game at all. All right. Now, these new guys that they brought in, I don't know a whole lot about, other than, what we've talked about in the past and what we've written about over on New York Giants on SI. So I want to see in training camp how they look, how they're deployed, where they line up. All I can tell you is I know that they've got position flexibility. Ledbetter has flexibility. Robertson Harris, flexibility. So they can line them up inside, they can line them up outside. So I want to see how they kind of play out, and I'll be able to tell you a little bit more once I see that, once they put the pads on and they start going up against the offensive line. So don't really have much on that for you right now. But what I will say, in some, the Giants appear to have a little better depth on the defensive line. It's just a matter of how they sort it all out. And, Elijah Chapman, I know a lot of you are like, hey, you forgot about Elijah Chapman. Elijah Chapman, he's a guy that I really, really want to see make the roster. I thought he showed flashes. I thought he showed strength against the run. Probably needed to get a little bit stronger to shed at the point of attack. Showed a little bit of pass rushing ability. His hustle was second to none, I thought. So he's a guy that I really hope doesn't get caught up in the wash when the Giants set their defensive line. I think the Giants will keep 5 on the defensive line. Um, right now, I can guess who the 5 are going to be. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably going to be Dexter, Darius Alexander, Roy Robertson Harris. I'd like them to keep Elijah Chapman. And then it's just a question of if it's going to be Ledbetter or somebody else. So we're going to have to kind of see it, who gets that fifth spot. But I do think they'll keep 5 on that defensive line. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about expectations for the group. So don't go anywhere. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked on Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We're talking Giants defensive line. All right, it all starts in the trenches, ladies and gentlemen. And last year, the Giants defensive line, even with Dexter Lawrence, not very successful. That's got to change this year. Goes without saying. Now, I have said numerous times, I'll say it again, Dexter can't do it all by himself. And what's interesting about the last few years is that Dexter, who should probably be playing roughly between 60% to 63% of the defensive snaps to keep him fresh, to keep him, to get him through the season, he's seen his snap percentage rise. All right. The last 3 years, he has played 82%, 67%, and 73% of the defensive snaps. That's too much. All right. Dexter, he was a rock. He didn't miss any time, earlier in his career. Last year, he missed some time, had some injury issues. You want to keep him fresh, and especially this year coming up with the late bye week. So it is so important that the Giants find guys that they can plug in there when Dexter needs a rest, and guys that, the opponent's not necessarily going to target and have success against. And oh, by the way, did I mention Dexter Lawrence also contributes on special teams? All right. If I'm the coaching staff, I maybe pull him off special teams at this point in his career. There's got to be somebody else who can go out there and play special teams to where Dexter Lawrence doesn't have to do that. So the Giants have been getting their money's worth out of Dexter. He's been delivering, but he can't do it all by himself. He needs a running mate. And the hope is that somebody from this group that they have added will emerge as that running mate. Okay. The Giants also are going to need to come up with a rotation. So you figure right now, if I had to take a guess on what the starting unit's going to be, you figure for a 2-man front, you're going to have Dexter, and I think Roy Robertson Harris is probably going to be his running mate to start. Eventually, like I said, it's going to be Darius Alexander. At what point? I don't know. Again, it depends on if Darius Alexander is healthy and if he is able to catch up on what he missed in the spring. All right. So bottom line with the Giants defensive line, they've got talent. They've gone to more of a experience type of look for the defensive line. The youth movement really, they tried, but it didn't really work out. So you have to think that guys like DJ Davidson, Jordan Riley will probably be on the bubble this summer. All right. They're going to need strong camps to convince the coaching staff to keep them. I don't know that that's going to happen. Special teams will obviously factor in for some of those guys, but the Giants defensive front, they've got to get that fixed because look, at one point, the defensive line was always the crown jewel of the Giants. It was the strongest unit that they had. The last several years, that has not been the case. And that's even with all-world Dexter Lawrence. Giants got to get back to that because I don't have to tell you that if you don't win in the trenches, you ain't going to win games. So hopefully the Giants now have enough firepower to where they can win in the trenches and start winning some more games and imposing their will on some of these potent offenses that they're going to be facing this coming season. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked on Giants podcast. Again, no show tomorrow because I'm taking off for the July 4th holiday, so I hope everybody has a good one. And I also, again, want to thank you for making Locked on Giants part of your day today. If you're looking for another listen, check out our Locked on NFL Scouting podcasts. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Everybody have a great and safe weekend. I'll be back Monday with all new shows as we continue to look at the Giants position groups as we count down to training camp.